on into the Utah Blockcast. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah Insider for KSL Sports. Good to be back with you on a Tuesday. Appreciate everybody for tuning in over the last 48 hours. It's been a lot of fun since Utah's 43-10 victory over UCLA Saturday night. Had a lot of fun breaking that one down. A lot of content. Appreciate everybody for going to KSL Sports, digesting the content, going to YouTube. It's been great. So obviously it helps when the product is fun, and I think that's what we got Saturday night with Utah and their performance against the Bruins. So on today's episode, this is Tuesday, which means we're going to break down what Coach Whittingham had to share at his press conference on Monday. So this is our In Whitt's Words episode, and excited to dive into just a couple things. Now, with this, I think it's really interesting, now that we've got a game and we've got context, to break some of this down and to go through some of what he had to share in his presser and all that sort of stuff. So let's start with, I think, the most important thing to highlight beginning today is Coach Whittingham's comments on Rob McBride, who is going to be inducted into Utah's Ring of Honor this Saturday. It's a significant one for Utah. Rob McBride was a tremendous icon, a tremendous figure in the history of Utah football. I blanked to find a word that properly described what he means to Utah football. So let me get to Whittingham here, and we'll go ahead. We'll watch this.
Coach Mack was responsible for the resurgence of Utah football. Did a phenomenal job recruiting. Got really good players into the program. Masterful recruiter. If you just say what is Coach Mack's strength in recruiting, and in college that's the most important aspect of your job. So you can say he was the best at what was the most important. He had a great rapport with his players. Players loved him. Passionate coach. Loves the game. Still coaches to this day. I believe he's still working with kids in the community and helping out where he can. So he's continuing to be effective. But he really put Utah football back on the map, like I said. And for me personally, gave me my first opportunity in Division I football. I'm forever grateful for that. I got my start here at Utah. Came from right up the road at Idaho State in a 1AA program, and so he was instrumental in my path and coaching path, and very well deserved, obviously deserving of his Ring of Honor award that he's going to be, or induction that he's going to be getting this week, and he's meant so much to the community. Not just Utah football and the university, but he's so active in the community, and he's a guy that is constantly giving and has done that all his life, and like I said, I'm eternally grateful for him and what he did for me.
Pull up his words here. I think it's important for us to keep in mind what Rob McBride really means to this program, right? A lot of us, maybe a younger generation, didn't fully appreciate what McBride did in his time at Utah, but he was instrumental in kind of laying the foundation for Urban Meyer and now Kyle Whittingham to build upon. And his Mafu mantra obviously it still rings true throughout the walls of the program, of the mental toughness, the unity, and focus and all that sort of stuff. Those are things that are still synonymous with Utah football to today. So his all of that was due to Rob McBride. He laid the foundation, and what's really cool is seeing him up at Rice-Eccles Stadium. Still, almost every single game, you can see him up there interacting with fans, interacting with former players, current players who show a lot of respect to Rob McBride, and he means a lot to Utah football. Utah probably wouldn't be where it is today without McBride and what he was able to do in those early 90s and building the program back up from the depths. And I think it's I hope that Utah fans show up and show out for Coach McBride on Saturday and show him a lot of appreciation. I think we can all do a lot more of that. McBride still continuing to help out, as Coach Whittingham said, in the community, and he does a lot. He's still involved with coaches clinics and camps and getting out and doing all sorts of stuff. And there's a lot of people here locally that, whether you're Utah, whether you're BYU, that have a lot of positive interactions and positive, really great stories of McBride and what he's meant to people here in the community. So, important place to start here is honoring Coach McBride, who will be inducted into the Ring of Honor, which will be pretty significant. And I think obviously it's a big deal, for Utah to get him on the Ring of Honor, and he's a big reason why Utah has continued to have success to this very day. So another thing that Coach Whittingham talked about is Smith Snowden and Lander Barton and their usage on the offensive side of the ball. And here's what he had to say. All right, now transitioning. Another thing that really stood out with Coach Whittingham in his press conference were some of the things that he had to share about their two-way stars, and Smith Snowden, Lander Barton, and even Jackson Denny, who I think probably surprised a lot of people with the reps he got at receiver. But here's what Coach Whitt had to say about sort of their plan. Obviously very curious about how they're going to be utilized. There's a lot of curiosity, a lot of concern even amongst the fans. But I think Utah is going to be really, really mindful of their usage. They don't want to overwork them. They want to continue to monitor them. But I think it's going to be important moving forward that we understand that their usage is going to be dictated week by week and that sort of stuff. So here's what Coach Whitt had to say there.
Well, we plan on using them each and every week. How much is exactly as you mentioned, what the matchup is and what personnel groups they're in. Coach Beck typically goes into a game with 4, 5, or 6 personnel groups, and just depending on how much they're, how many of those groups are involved. But I thought it was really good production from those guys. Smith, 5 catches for 56 yards. And some carries as well. Lander caught the touchdown pass and actually blocked really well too. Lander, I'm convinced, could be one of the best tight ends in the country if that was his full-time position. So he's a big plus. And then Benny did exactly what we hoped. He didn't have a lot of production on paper, but he did a great job of taking the top off the coverage and stretching the defense and opening some things up for other guys.
All right, there you have it, Coach Whitt on his two-way players. And here I'll pull up the quote here. So yeah, obviously the plan is they're going to continue to utilize Smith Snowden, Lander Barton, and Jackson Benny each and every week moving forward. And I think the important thing there is, their usage and how they're going to be utilized offensively, defensively will be determined, in large part by the week-to-week, game-to-game type matchup. And so, when we're talking about Smith Snowden specifically, I think it's important that, we understand that there are going to be matchups where he's going to, be required to play almost exclusively on defense. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that in the next couple of weeks with Texas Tech coming to town and that wide receiving corp that they have there. You're going to need Smith. So I think that's really important context to consider, moving forward when we're talking about Smith and Lander and Jackson, is that, it is going to be determined by, the matchups. And so I think that's important. And with UCLA, there was certainly some concern with Nico Iamaleava and his prowess as a passer and some of the talent. But, UCLA, I think Utah felt really good about what they would be able to do up front with their defensive line and getting pressure on him. And they love the versatility and flexibility that they have, in the defensive secondary with some of their other guys, with Teo Johnson, Jackson Benny, and all of that. So you have depth there and versatility that you can utilize to, if you need, more of a dynamic offensive Smith Snowden, you can do that. And so, yeah, I think that's important to keep in mind. And, he later added clarity to that, they are very mindful of their snap count and their usage. And the sports science team, had conversations with Colorado this offseason about how they helped Travis Hunter play full time on both sides of the ball. So yeah, I'm not sure that we'll see Smith Snowden and Leonard Barton playing full time offensively and defensively, but I think it's good that Utah had those conversations, gained some insight into how to manage them, and they're going to be mindful. And again, just to add clarity here, Smith Snowden averaged 58 snaps exclusively on defense last year. On Saturday night, he played just 47, with 22 of those coming on offense. So we'll continue to monitor his snap counts moving forward. But I think, again, let's all take a deep breath, exhale, and understand that his usage is going to be determined week to week, game by game, matchup by matchup. And I think that's what you want to hear, because Utah, Whittingham also added that Smith Snowden is their premier cover guy, right? That's obvious, and he made that very clear that he is their top guy. And so when they need him to be that guy, he will be that guy. And same with Lander, right? He talked about him being, if he fully committed to tight end, that he could be one of the best, but he's a linebacker and he has to play a really important role on that defensive side of the ball. So I think it's really encouraging. I think Utah is going to be really wise with how they use them, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see how exactly they use them on a week to week basis. So next big one, and I'm not going to go to the video, I'm just going to quote it here. I asked Coach Whittingham about their 60% pressure rate on Nico Iamaleava Saturday night and what they were able to do there. And, a really impressive number. On average, across college football, a good pressure rate is north of 30%, somewhere between 30 and 35%. So for Utah to end up with a 59.4% pressure rate on all snaps with 60% with just their base pass rush, I think is really exciting. And I asked Coach Whitt what that does, and he said, that's big for a defensive coordinator to be able to generate a passer with just 4. It opens up all kinds of coverage combinations, coverage opportunities when you're able to drop 7 into coverage. And so I think that that's really significant. Pressure with 4 is it's a big deal for Utah. And a player that I want to highlight here, we came into the season talking a lot about Logan Fano stepping up and emerging as the premier pass rusher for Utah this season. And I think we saw that, right? He got the early sack, another tackle for loss. We saw what we wanted and needed to see from Logan. Obviously, he left the game a little bit with an injury of some sort, but he came back, continued to play. He looked totally fine. And yet John Henry Daly, I think, is the guy that really surprised. If you're looking for a surprise performance, from Saturday night, outside of Smith Snowden and his usage on offense, I think John Henry Daly is the guy. Ended up with 2 sacks, 7 total pressures. And what was really interesting, diving into some of the numbers in the post game, was he had a 57% win rate in true pass situations. So that's a really significant number. I looked back at Jonah Ellis in 2023 because we all remember how dynamite he was off the edge that season. He ended up with a 29% win rate that year in true pass situations. So obviously going to be incredibly difficult to maintain that sort of number, but to have that, a 57% win rate, which means he's beating the guy across from him almost 60% of the time, that's huge. To have that with Logan Fano and some of the other depth that some of the other options that Utah has at that defensive end spot with Cash Dillon and Lance Holtzclaw, who we saw register a tackle for loss. I think that's really, really encouraging. So overall, I think there's a lot to be encouraged by with what we saw from UCLA. And as Coach Whitt always does, he made sure to emphasize the point that we're not overlooking, Utah is not overlooking Cal Poly. They are going to come prepared for that contest, and I think that's going to be really interesting to see what the crowd looks like, how the offense performs. There's all of a sudden a lot of excitement for seeing Utah football play against Cal Poly Saturday afternoon. I think there's a lot of excitement, and Devin Dampier also shared that excitement that he's excited to see the crowd Saturday afternoon and to see what they're all about as well. So I hope Utah fans show up, show out, show up early, and have fun. But yeah, just a quick little Tuesday episode running through some of Whitt's words from his press conference on Monday and adding some context there. I think, again, with Coach Mack being inducted into the Ring of Honor, with Smith, Snowden, Lander, Barton, Jackson, Benny, their two-way usage. I think those are all things that we're really interested in. And then obviously the pass rush with Utah and getting that 60% pass rush pressure on Nico Iamaleava. Some really encouraging signs for Utah, and accordingly, they ended up being ranked, cracking the top 25 in the AP poll, ending up 25th in the new AP poll, which just came out just a little bit ago. They are the newest member of the top 25. They've got Texas Tech, Iowa State, and Arizona State among other Big 12 members in the AP top 25. So obviously, I think there was a lot of intrigue into seeing where Utah would end up in the new top 25 this week, given their dominating performance and a lot of the talk around Utah football this weekend from national media members. Surprised, certainly, to see Utah come in at only just 25, especially considering some of the chaos we saw elsewhere throughout college football. But look, one game, 1 week, and Utah knows that this isn't anything, and we should know that this is nothing, right? This means nothing. The AP poll is just a nice thing to have. It's a nice talking point. It means nothing, right? So who cares in at the end of it? But it's just another talking point and all of that. So we'll keep it moving forward, and excited for tomorrow. For tomorrow's Utah Blockcast episode, I welcomed Cam Meller of PFSN, which is a data analytical sports site, which is a lot of fun. We dove into some of the numbers from UCLA's from Utah knocking off UCLA, and I think there's some really exciting numbers, some really encouraging numbers, and Cam shared his thoughts on obviously the Utah offensive line and Devin Dampier and his performance. So looking forward to that episode tomorrow. That'll drop tomorrow, Wednesday. And then also just a quick reminder, we are going live Wednesday evening as well to just kind of run through some things, preview the weekend and all that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, that's what we've got coming up here on the Utah Blockcast. Appreciate everybody again for tuning in, showing support. It's been a lot of fun, and looking for the fun to continue this season.